Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this OPC meeting to order for March 8th at 8:30. And first item on the agenda is to approve the prior minutes. May I have a motion? Well, first of all, are there any edits, deletions, additions, typos? Nothing? Okay. Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes for the February 3rd, 2023?
So moved.
Steve,
Second.
Okay, Jim and Seth.
All
Okay.
those in favor?
All those in favor? Thank you. Okay. Abstain?
Just reflex, I know.
Okay. George is abstaining? Unanimous. Okay, terrific. Next item is to discuss, we'll just do our usual. So I think probably everybody here is aware that we, but I'm going to go through this for the record, that town successfully negotiated the purchase of Great Island. Yesterday's press release announcing the amended purchase price of $85 million was from an original agreed price of $103 million. And it's posted, all this information is posted on the website, but issues that were uncovered during the due diligence period will need to be addressed, and that was taken into consideration in determination of the price. The closing is May 5th, and after that time, the town will take delivery of the property and begin to address needs for work that needs to be completed before residents will be able to access the property. So I just want to make that clear that people can't go on the property now, and we will post. We will definitely let people know. And we're hoping to have some sort of an open house afterwards to let residents come and see what they're investing in. On Friday, Friday, February 10th, a couple days after our last OPC meeting, I met with Senator Murphy to talk about different things that are going on in town. He's aware of the major developments in downtown Darien and in the Heights, Narone Heights. I took the opportunity to discuss a project that it's been long in the works but needs significant financial support from the state to get it over the finish line, and that's the train station at Narone Heights. So with the new growth in Narone Heights, a proper train station I think is an appropriate place to focus our efforts. He mentioned that state funds to aid in projects that encourage mass transit and help alleviate congestion on our highways is there. We just have to figure out how to access them. This summer, Metro North plans to shut the line between New Canaan and Stamford. My understanding is it's between Memorial Day and Labor Day, and that's to build a new station over in Stamford. I know I've talked about Eversource and clear cutting many times before, but since everybody can see the devastation that's happening in town from the results of Pura and Eversource, I wanted to take a minute to reiterate some important facts. So first, I feel for all of the residents along the 3.5 miles of track that Darien has in, Metro North has in Darien. But the only property the town was afforded the opportunity to fight for was property that's on town right-of-way, and that's over in Little Brook. So I think it's important to realize that over the past 2 years, the town has spent hundreds of man-hours between town employees and town council and tens of thousands of dollars on mediation for Little Brook Road alone. So from emails that I've received, I think it's clear that residents are unaware of the negotiated replanting plan. So we have it here, and it's in the selectman's office if anybody wants to come up and take a look. It's also on the website. So, and I think if you zoom in, you can see it. But it is a lot of plants. There are 140 trees that are scheduled to be replanted, and 276 pollinator or native plants that will be going in. So per our agreement, the replanting plan will start no later than July 1st, but they are over there doing the cutting down of the trees right now. So I believe the planting plan will start much sooner than that. The plants have to be maintained for 18 months, which means they need to be watered, and Eversource will be replanting any plants that don't live past that, up to that 18 months. So yesterday, the Director of Public Works at Gentel and I met with Eversource, Metro North, and Department of Transportation representatives to discuss mitigation of the unsightly and I consider unsafe conditions along the rest of the tracks in our community. So it remains to be seen what we can do there, but we continue to fight really hard for this. I know this is really hard for our residents. Frankly, it's hard for me to see all this. But people need to understand that Metro North and Eversource, they're working together on property that ConnDOT, the Department of Transportation, owns. So our options are limited. Last night, I presented the Board of Selectmen budget to the Board of Finance, and I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for their hard work, and I really want to thank also Kate and Jen for all of the work they did behind the scenes on this to put together a budget that I think meets the needs of our community while considering the impact on our taxpayers. So I'm sure Jim is going to speak more about that. Both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen budgets are on the website if anybody wants to take a look. And just a reminder that the swap shop is closed until Monday, April 3rd. There won't be a place to take any donations or leave anything there. But the Darien Thrift Shop on the Post Road is open, and they're always available to take your smaller items. So that's all that I have. Does anyone need to leave early? No? Okay. We'll just go around the room then. Tracy, do you have anything?
Sure. I can kind of give you an update of a few things going on in town, in town, obviously not town. I was expecting to go last, so let me pull this up really quick.
It's all right.
Okay. Just give you a quick update of a few committees that have maybe some bills that would particularly affect what's going on here. So right now we're in the committee phase, so all the bills were submitted in January. The ranking members and powers that be went through and divided the bills up into committees. We've been pulling the bills up from committee to public hearing, so that's done. So now we're in the public hearing process. And once we hear a public hearing, we then move the bills on from committee. So we're in between those two stages. We still have time to move bills from public hearing to committee, but most of the committees have already pulled up all the bills that they're going to see in public hearing. So if there is a bill that anybody is concerned about, they absolutely can send me an email and question, but if you do not see that it's been pulled for public hearing, you are probably, if it's a bill that you don't like, you're probably safe. If it's a bill that you do like, please contact me right away and ask about it. Some of the committees that have particularly maybe bills that Darien would be concerned about. GAE is dealing with the voting bills, and they had a public hearing the other day about mandatory voting and rank voting, and they've also heard early voting. It sounds like the Secretary of State wants more of a 10 to 14 day early voting, so we'll see where that comes. Obviously, nothing is done until it comes out of committee and it gets voted on in the houses. Energy and tech, this is dealing with some of the Eversource issues. I do have a bill in that would look at, and probably won't help as much now, but look at some of the vegetation management and how Eversource contacts those within our town and allows appeal processes within our town. Some of the things that I mentioned in the bill that I would like to see done is that instead of the property that is abutting, which is literally touching, to have it be a radius, much more like planning and zoning does. If there's if there's something being built, that there's a radius of towns that can appeal. Also giving the town right to consent to instead of appeal. And then, this is kind of fluffy. I'm not sure how we would really put how we would really hold anybody to this, but having the utility companies be good stewards of their land. So obviously we have town land that they're taking care of, but making sure that they're also good stewards of their own land. So I know Monica's doing everything that she can on town side, and I think that it's important that residents of town know that. And then, as her partner in the state, I will do everything I can on the state side to make sure that any gaps in the laws get addressed that way, which would give the town more of a right to do any appeals. Housing, I'm not sure if everybody gets my newsletter, but there was a bill that came out in housing recently, and this is one that went through public hearing. It's called a fair share housing, but it would mandate high amounts of subsidized housing on each of the towns, and it's very much a stick approach, that if the town doesn't make its mark within 10 years, then they will have mandatory as of right zoning with any area that has water or sewer. It can be up to 20 houses per acre, I guess, in those areas. So this is something that has bipartisan opposition. So we'll see where that goes. Even though it was moved out of committee, I think it's something that hopefully we won't really see affect us. Public health. That is one of the committees that I'm on. I'm not sure that anything in there necessarily affects the town. I am working towards allowing pharmacists to prescribe contraception, and I'm also working towards allowing Plan B, which is an over-the-counter med, to go in vending machines for. This would be particularly useful in colleges, so that's not something that would necessarily affect here. Education, I've been in touch with Duke and Dr. Adley, because the reading curriculum that has been mandated upon the towns, and this also across the state is getting a lot of opposition. And I really appreciate Dr. Adley coming to Hartford and speaking out against this and asking them to take a pause on it, and also including other curriculum that might be working best for the individual towns. So I'll continue to work with him on that. General law is not one that I'm on, but they deal a lot with consumer protection, and I've worked with them on creating a Narcan vending machine, which may be in the works to be a pilot program. And then also cannabis regulations. So we'll see where they move forward with that. And I think that is all I've got. If anybody has any issues, like I said, please check out my website at repmarra, repmarra.com, or they can email me, and I'm always available to you and to the residents.
Tracy, can you just say for our residents, if they want to submit testimony on one of these things, what's the drop dead date?
So when a public hearing comes about, we find out about it really quickly. So if there is a bill that you are concerned about, let me know so I can help you. You have to watch it really quick. We will have the public hearings get announced pretty much 5 days before, and you have to submit your testimony. It's usually 24 hours before, or sign up to testify. So all that process goes really quick. Sometimes it's over a weekend, so sometimes you'll find out on Friday, and then it comes up on Tuesday, or you find out on Thursday, and then obviously you all are closed on Friday here, but then it comes up on Monday. So things can go really quickly, but it is generally 24 hours that you have to sign up. And I'm happy to help anybody with that process along the way.
So people can submit written testimony after the hearing?
People
How late
yes,
after?
until it gets voted out of committee.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think it could maybe a couple things on that I found valuable. You can follow certain bills
Yes.
literally the same way you might follow sort of a topic on social media. You can click on, create an account, and it'll send you updates when things happen with respect to the bill, deadlines, public testimony opens or closes and so forth, and when it moves out of a committee. So I think that's very helpful. In terms of submitting testimony, I submitted on a couple, and you're able to do it in writing. You can do it in person. You can actually do it via phone, right, and call and leave a message. And you can actually, and if you submit it online, you can actually, if you're uncomfortable, you can actually do it anonymously. So people should definitely be encouraged to sort of give feedback on a lot of these, bills.
If you go into cga.ct.gov, on the very bottom, there's a little window that comes up, and it'll say 2023 bills, and then you just have to know the bill number, and then you can enter the bill number in there, and from there you can click follow this bill. If you know which committee it is, and there's also a section on cga.ct.gov where you can go into the committee and find the phone numbers for that committee if you are confused on how to get it submitted digitally. And there's also, each committee sometimes has their own distinctive rules. But at any time, I'm happy to help anybody if there's issues.
On the Fair Share Act, I think that and a lot of these other bills sort of neglect to look at the actual cost on the municipality, which ultimately is borne by the taxpayers. And when you look at, like you take down towns such as Darien, for example, where schools might be at 99% capacity, or certain sewer lines may be at like 98% capacity, I don't think they're necessarily taking into account just because there is a sewer there and you hook up to it, if millions of dollars of additional investment needs to be made in terms of that infrastructure to allow that unit to come on, I don't think they're looking at what the marginal investment is that these communities need to make and how that affects taxpayers, taxes, and ultimately the cost of housing. So I think it's, so many of these analyses or I should say bills and ideas are sort of void of the ultimate financial impact on towns.
And affects the surrounding towns as well.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have sewer in your town and you use sewer in Stamford, or if Norwalk tries to do this and their sewer system is not up to par, it ends up on our beaches or.
Well, who's to say Stamford can even take more
Right.
and process more, and that's the ripple effect of.
So a quick calculation that we went through would be that Darien would require 1,200 units. Pricing at $450 per unit would exceed $570 million.
And when you
Over
talk
10
about
years.
that, when you talk about the cost, that's what would have to happen in the town, whether it was a private developer doing it or whether it was the town going out and acquiring property and doing it, right?
Right, but however, if you have a private builder doing it, most likely, because the private builder needs to make good on their multifamily unit, they'll build it at 20% affordable, or subsidized, let's call it subsidized, and then the 80% will be, of the housing will be on top of it at fair share, or market price, so we're not just looking at 1,200 units. Obviously, we're looking at, we've got the other 80% that would be the market share.
Is what you're saying when a
units.
private developer does it, they're actually increasing the denominator.
Right, because they have to make
So,
money on
yeah.
their multifamily unit, which makes sense. Unless
Tracy,
the town does it.
I haven't followed it close enough. As part of this conversation, it seems like the pressure is on the suburban communities outside of the cities. Is this encompass, or is there conversation about the cities? You drive up the line and you see vacant lots, vacant land, you see some development along 95, but you would think from an infrastructure standpoint, from a job standpoint, from a transportation standpoint, is the state really focusing on how do we redevelop these cities and make them viable places for living? There's educational centers in these cities. There's vacant land if you go into any city. There's the transportation, and it's easily accessible from a job standpoint too. It just seems like there's this constant push into the suburbs, yet the cities, I'm not saying they get off scot-free, but we've got waterfront cities, and if the right investment is made, you're also dealing like we are here now with empty commercial buildings.
Yeah.
The city's going through a process of how do you convert those buildings, but this constant push into the suburbs.
Certainly, and I have the privilege of, representing part of Norwalk as well, and, the constraint on Norwalk is their sewer system
Yeah.
is at the, it's been Band-Aid, you've got Band-Aid approach there, but their schools also, they need to, so if you're gonna have, a big multifamily unit, and they've got one coming in now, possibly at Webster Bank Lot, and,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
worked, in a
that's-
previous life, I worked, with the mayor over there. I think they've done a phenomenal job of trying to build and accommodate, but you go up the line even further, I think there's more
More
opportunities.
capacity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, Fairfield's got a major project right around their new, what I call their new railroad station. They have a new one, they put a little farther up the line. Bridgeport is going to develop their airport. They're selling for $10 million. I had to raise my hand on that one. But at any rate, $10 million to a state agency that is going to take it over and run it as a commercial airport. And they have there's an entrepreneur who's coming in to redo the waterfront. They're going to add a construction thing
project.
there. Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah. So,
Seth?
well, there's a lot going on.
You have a lot of papers there.
Yes, well, I just happened to get a little email here yesterday, so I note that we approved $103 million for the purchase of Great Island, and we got a discount. We're at $85 million. So the question now is, well, all right, what does the RTM do? We approved 103, it's at 85. Do we adjust our approval?
No.
So I don't know.
No.
I don't know
No.
what.
Your approval
So,
encompassed.
I think
excuse me, I have the floor. It's on the table, there's $18 million here. I don't know, I just got this yesterday, and so we'll take it under advisement, that's all I can say.
Okay.
Seth, the bond authorization was for more than just the actual purchase of the land. It included all the things that we needed to do to make the land usable, including engineering, remediation. legal
Beyond the
fees.
103,
No, within the 103.
or within the 103, all right.
So we will
Well,
not be asking for, or we will not be offering any of that money back.
Yeah. So I think
Well-
if you think about the overall appropriation rate, as Kate mentioned, it was for land and other stuff sort of in connection with buying the land. I think, the intention of the Board of Finance would be to finance the initial acquisition, but like other projects, there may be additional costs that we can use some of that additional authorization for, right? But then I think once we're done with what that authorization was originally intended to include, if it becomes unused and unnecessary, like some of the other projects and so forth, then we would collapse that sort of excess capacity so that we don't have outstanding, but at least for the near term, the expectation
you
is
can
that.
see where my concern is. Okay, great. So there's nothing much to say there, because again, you just got it. So-
Yeah, I don't think you guys should have concern, because, I mean, it's super well spelled out exactly what when the 103 can and what it can't be used for, and I think, we'll obviously make sure that that's
Crystal
We
clear.
will adhere to that.
100%.
Super. So things that we've done, on Monday, we had a great address by Tom Hennick, who's the FOI education guy from the state. I think we were concerned about an hour. It went by like lightning, and I think the whole body learned a lot. We have 7 committees, plus districts, and they're all having meetings. And to keep out of FOIA trouble is not easy. So he was very, very helpful in helping everybody in the RTM understand how to avoid getting into issues. And surprisingly, there wasn't, everybody was bright, and I was watching for fading, and everybody was wide awake. So it was a great presentation, and terrific. We also put the money up for the fire department for their new engine. And we approved the workers' comp settlement for $142,000, and then accepted some gifts. So, it was a good meeting, and we got a lot done. things coming up. We're going to, at the request of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we're going to amend the zoning regulations, Appendix B1, to upgrade all the fees. You have to do that periodically because obviously over a period of time they get stale. The best way I can explain that. We're going to do the Darien High School track for $817,000. And we're looking at the blight ordinance, updating that so it includes commercial properties. That's not an easy thing. There's state regulations regarding it. We've been working on this for several months with town council to try and make this conform to the state, but also give the blight committee something to work with so that we can try and address those issues when you see them. Then it would, a little accounting, the false alarm fees for the police, putting them in the general fund, a little change in accounting, put the money in where that's where it ought to be. And we're doing a little bit of that as we go along. In addition to that, we've been working now for several months on trying to rewrite Appendix B, the committee descriptions. We found out that we were handing out these committee descriptions, and when you read them, they don't really reflect what we're doing today. So we're updating them, and there's two things that we're doing. One is we did a guideline, which we've already published, which gives any person coming into the RTM and also members of the RTM an idea of if certain issues come before the RTM, what committees are they going to go to, so people can anticipate, what's going to happen there. That's part of it. And then the other part of Appendix B is the actual writing which goes in, which talks about what each committee does. So there's two pieces, and we're now integrating the two pieces so that they agree with each other. And so that's going along. And then there's just an announcement that has to be made at the budget meeting about the increase in the threshold for acceptance of gifts. We don't act on it. RTM doesn't act on it, but it's required to announce it, so we will do that. So that in a nutshell is what's going on.
Seth, on the
Yeah.
DHS track, the increase in the authorization from like 450, 800, why did that go on the RTM? Why wasn't that voted on this past Monday?
The Rules Committee had published the agenda, and we didn't know whether that was going to be approved or not.
Jim, if you recall, it didn't come to the Board of Selectmen until the 27th.
Got
So
it.
there was,
So
yeah.
I think the RTM was looking at, they might be putting it on their agenda and not having not actually having the request before them.
Okay, so when will you guys actually vote on that?
That's on March 20, right? March 20.
So March 20, so that won't actually become effective until March 30?
10 days after.
Yeah, so we should talk to Jen about just whether the delay on that, whether that's interferes with bond, 'cause I think whether we include that in the bonding.
Whether you want to put it in the next.
Yeah.
I think that, it's relatively safe to assume that you could put it in there, but.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I know.
She's also got to look at the cash flow and when will it actually happen to make sure that we don't borrow too far in advance of the work all being
Well,
done.
I think it's starting 10 minutes after school completes.
Right.
Right. So I think maybe just on some of these things, I know the
As soon as the
RTM
graduation
sometimes
feels
puts
is
things
clear.
on the rules agenda, in anticipation of it, but I think some of these things.
I think the real
bonding side-
problem was that things were moving forward without notifying the Board of Selectmen that this was on the table, and it's actually the Board of Selectmen who has to submit any special appropriations to the RTM.
Yeah.
And we didn't find out about it until well through the process, so
And the board
maybe
then
if.
went through a process too of
Yeah.
whether we were going to do it or not, or extend
Yeah.
it, yeah.
So just maybe in the future, give us a heads up earlier in the process, because I actually found out about it at the last OPC meeting. So if we know about it sooner, we can be ready to act quicker.
Yeah, we should say well coordinated. I think this is a little bit unique because we're very quickly approaching our bonding window, but I'm sure we'll work it out.
No, good points.
Yeah, we try to be flexible, and if stuff gets approved after the Rules Committee but before the RTM meets, I'm not afraid to stand up there and say, listen, everybody, we need to get this done. And the RTM's been very cooperative.
Okay.
And the Rules Committee has too, if I get it before, we publish the rules agenda probably, we try to hold off publishing it as long as we can, because we realize that there may be stuff out there that, is still cooking. But even then, if I've published the rules agenda and something comes up and it looks like we can act on it, I'll ask the Rules Committee to add it to the agenda. And they've been very willing to do that.
I'll just extend my thank you to you, Seth and Jim, for and Monica also for the expediency with which we've done some of these things over the last couple of months. And I think there's some lessons learned in the timing. I know on the track, that all came up and was relooked at again and went back to the Facilities Committee meeting, but good points made here on a go-forward basis, because some of it has to do with contractual signing and getting stuff done over the course of the summer, which is the only time to do some of this stuff. But thank
Right.
you, all of you.
Have you guys been able to lock in the?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So we have the slot.
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
The Rules Committee agenda is published in January. And the Rules Committee sets the agenda for the representative town meeting.
You mean the calendar?
Calendar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's there,
Right.
and,
You should almost have that front and center as we talk about stuff at the Board of Ed.
Yeah.
Just to know the because then it's, especially stuff that's got to get to the first
Exactly.
selectman first.
and
If I
it's,
could also
you don't want to be in a position where you're going to put $800 million on the, even though we get the information out immediately. If I'm going to add something to the RTM, I just as soon have it on the Rules Committee vote on it,
Okay.
And, talk to staff.
Yes.
When those things are coming up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
include Jen, Rich, me
Yeah.
in the loop, and, so that we can make sure that things can happen.
Yeah, no, appreciate
Okay.
that.
800,000, not 800 million for a track.
Right.
I wasn't going to correct him, Jim.
I was. I was secretly having
Yeah,
like
is that
heart palpitations.
970, yes.
Titanium platinum track.
Yeah. Oh, did I say million? No, yeah.
Just kidding.
All right, so I think we have the message here, which we tightened up
Yeah.
the communication a little bit. Seth, going back to your FOIA thing, was there any discussion on RTM members using Darien emails?
Yes.
And how'd that go over?
Well, that's a work in progress.
Okay. Got
The
it.
Technology Committee of the Rules Committee is working on that. We cannot force people. We
Right.
can warn them, but we can't force people to use the Darien CP.gov.
But that was addressed then?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Did they talk about texting also? Because we've been FOIA'd with respect to our
Yes,
texts.
he said, I want you to all realize that when you're sitting there texting, you're creating a public record. And if you'd like to see it on the front page of the local newspaper, just be my guest, but just understand what you're doing.
It's just
Same
come
way
up.
if your personal emails, you're putting it on your personal email,
It's come up
He
more and
was-
more often on the
yes.
FOIA requests in terms of texts, so, yeah, good. Good.
Okay. Anything else for Seth? No? Okay, thanks, Seth. Duke?
I'll be somewhat brief, but just to Monica's point, we had the privilege of presenting the Board of Ed Education to the Board of Finance last night. The superintendent's budget came in at 494, which then the Board of Ed worked on, worked with the administration, and went back with the administration looking for efficiencies. As our budget has grown, I think it's more important than ever that we look at efficiencies with these budgets, and we look at what I said last night, what's actually impacting the students and how we continue to deliver that best education, not just in the state, but across the country with the rankings that we continuously get. So I think with any $110, $115 million budget, there's ways to look at efficiencies, whether it's from technology or how you deliver, how you put stuff up in the cloud, and how you use technology. So the administration took the lead based on recommendation from the board and came back with close to $1.5 million in efficiencies that they came up with. And, you know, the directive was really not to affect how we deliver education, sports, and clubs, but we've got a lot of investment over the years in administrative positions. We've made a lot of investment in technology. So how do we continuously look at delivering education in an efficient manner? So, you know, I give a lot of credit to the administration and the board for the work that was done and brought the budget down to 3.56, which I think is a great, it still delivers our promise. It's still why folks come to Darien from an educational standpoint. And that also includes the beginning of our new 3-year contract. The first year of that contract, the increase is 4.85%. I think also the board looked at, you know, and we'll do more work. A lot of this has been from guidance from the RTM and subcommittees and Board of Finance. We've got to continuously look at forecasting and looking out a little further. We do it on the capital side, but I think we've got to do it on the operating budget side also. And, you know, there are contracts coming up on nursing, on maintenance, and administrative assistance that are being worked on. There will be a bus contract next year that will be up for renewal, and there also is just an overall increase, continued increases in healthcare. So I think we've got to do, and we will continue to work on looking out further and making some current budget decisions based on that. So I think that'll be very helpful. We continue to focus on our priorities. Thank you again on the appropriation for the track and moving that forward. We have our facilities review coming up next Saturday, the 18th, which will be exciting to see Ox Ridge. The frame of the gymnasium, the cafeteria, the music room is up, so there are probably folks that have not seen that new building yet, and that building is headed toward completion, and it'll be exciting to kind of really have a grand opening of that school in August or September. We're forecasting a slight increase, 47 students in terms of the increase next year. One of the big components of the budget this year, we did eliminate budget control. We went back and looked at how often we use that, and we focused on the early part of the year when we do have the full allocation of the budget. I think Rich and the administrative team do a great job on the enrollment side. We did a new demographer this past year and have really good enrollment projections that include all the development that's going on in town, less Parklands and some of the Nielsen stuff, which I think is in its early phases, but we've got all the other developments built in there. So we're looking at a 47 student increase next year. But I think we're good on the sections that we have, and I know in working with the Board of Finance and the RTM, we have the commitment to go through the process if we need additional funds, and it would not impede the administration's ability to hire those teachers. The ongoing conversation is also around teachers and teacher shortages. I mean, that's just going to be a continuous theme. I will tell you, Marge and the Human Resources team do a phenomenal job looking at colleges and universities and how can we recruit. The problem is the pot gets smaller and each district is trying to pull from the same pot. So it's almost like the world of banking. You're pulling one branch manager from one branch to another branch and just changing the name on the front of the shop. So we're moving forward. Our new chief of security has been very involved in the interviewing and hiring of the SSOs. We'll hear more on that program shortly. We asked for a very detailed communication plan as to how that's going to be rolled out to the parents, how it's going to be rolled out to the students, and what that's going to look like from a school standpoint. But my understanding is very qualified candidates, some even we may know locally. So I think that's exciting. As I said last night, I think it's an area where we needed to lead in it. There's not a week that goes by where you don't hear of a shooting somewhere across this country, unfortunately, and other districts are following kind of our lead in this same model that we've rolled out. So I think that's important, and we'll hear more over the next couple of Board of Ed meetings as to what that staffing looks like, who they are, and kind of the communication plan around that. I think I'll pause there. Yes?
The contracts, what's the length for the ones?
3
that-
years.
3 years?
3 years.
All
Yeah.
of them?
Yeah, that's what we would look for.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. The nursing contract, all of them. The challenge on the nursing side too will be there's just a shortage of nurses also, so.
I
Yes.
want to encourage you on the 5-year projection.
Yes.
It's, as you know,
Yes.
and it's been around for a long time as a planning tool. Board of Finance does it, but I think it'll help Board of Education tremendously.
Yeah.
Doing that.
We do it, and we've done it, and we literally have this conversation, what do we do with it? So maybe we'll do it. I think we need to spend more time on it and look at the different components of it from the healthcare side especially, and work more in line with Board of Finance and the RTM on, make sure we understand what everyone's looking for in that forecast, but yes.
The only thing I've seen in something like that is they'll take the first year of the 5,
Right.
and that becomes the basis
Yes.
for the following year.
Yes.
And then they just keep rolling it.
Yeah.
And
Just the other thing to mention, we had this discussion this week. The board is going to look and have an agenda item where we're going to look at the budget process. We're going to do kind of a post and look at the budget process, get thoughts from the board perspective as to how we could do a better job, how we can do it more efficiently, the scheduling of it, and then also bring in our partners on the RTM subcommittees, the RTM and the Board of Finance, and to look at, is there a better agreement we can all have around what that budget process looks like. We also want to tie it back into when the schools look at the development of new curriculum or new programming. A lot of that work gets done over the course of the summer. And then we would rather have those conversations early fall. We want the conversations around the budget more to be about the dollars and the cents associated with them. We don't want to get into huge curriculum and program discussions during the budget process. So, but we've made it pretty clear on a go-forward basis that, these are our priorities. Some of it's back to basics, health, security, delivery of the curriculum, and then, how do we continuously get some efficiencies out of this budget?
Well, Duke, I would say on the planning side, I think you guys have traditionally done a great job on the capital side, and I think having the 5-year projection around capital in connection with HHR, I think allowed you all in the team to identify these are things that were otherwise planned to be done in 2 or 3 or 4 years. Let's roll them into the larger HHR and save dollars, right? And disruption to the school. And I think, as you all are thinking about maybe on the operating side, this may be a new program or a new language or a new sort of approach to staffing or so forth. If we see that coming down the line, that may also be helpful to think about if we're going to do this in 2 years, then in implementing something today, maybe we want to take into consideration what we're planning to do in a few years, similar to your approach on capital. I think it saved us money on the capital side and
Absolutely.
can help plan there, particularly around like FTEs, because we talk about 0.2 and 0.4,
Right.
but ultimately it's an individual, right?
Right.
So-
Well, it's we have enough of a trend that we can look back on when we roll out a new program like a Mandarin. We take it from the high school to the middle school. We have enough information to see kind of how that catches on, so we can do a better job of that 0.2 goes to a 0.4 goes to a 1, in a pretty short period of time. But we also have to look at, as I said last night, we have curriculum, programming, clubs, and everything. The offerings are incredible. As I said, they're probably better than some small colleges and universities. So we have to continuously look at what are the right things that we have and that we deliver on.
Thanks, Duke.
Thank you.
George?
So good morning. So for the record, I'm George Riley. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, sitting in today for Steve Olvaney, who is letting business take priority, imagine that, this morning. A couple of items. We did just meet last evening, so there's some things fresh I can report on. First, picking up from the last minutes, I see that Holmes was still outstanding to have its project approved by P&Z. That did happen, so all 3 schools have been approved and are moving apace now. Last night we did approve an extension of time for the Norotan Heights Shopping Center project to move forward. They expect to be beginning demolition as soon as the next week, as I understand it. But they were bumping up against the 1-year point at which their approval from P&Z would have expired, so they asked for the 1-year extension now, and they got that. So we were all very enthusiastic about the notion that that is going to kick into gear very soon. We talked about accessory dwelling units. That is something where we picked up on the state statute. Actually, we opted out of a statute concerning that, but we know that we need to address it. So we do plan to get into that probably in April to look at what size lots they would be appropriate for, what size units there would be appropriate, the connection to water and sewer as available, and some parking issues that will go along with this. So that's on the docket for April. As of April 1, the governor's permission to have outdoor dining approved without going through planning and zoning will expire. So all of those restaurants that have been taking advantage of it need to address the appropriate authorities. There are a couple that need to come to the town first. I think they may have, because they've been using town parking. Others will have to come to P&Z to get a permanent approval if they want to do that. Beyond that, we did spend a little time on the legislative review, and that Fair Shares Act in particular was discussed, particularly because the P&Z staff, Fred Donite, I think in particular taking the lead, had written a letter which I believe both Steve Mulvaney and Monica signed off on, and did submit to the legislature opposing that legislation at this point. A quick comment on the fees. I think it's been pre-COVID at least since we last increased the fees, so that it's definitely timely for that to happen. And if I can put in a comment about the Blight Review Board, which I happen to chair, we have been...
I should have...
No need, but...
give you a handshake on that.
No, it's okay, but we've had good conversations with Frank Kemp, who chairs TGS&A. Nothing is ever as simple as we would like. We understand that the state statute authorizing blight review may pertain only to housing units, so we may have a hiccup there, but I think there may also be something submitted to the legislature to expand that. So anyway, we are looking forward to that moving forward as well as it can soon. So I think that's about all that I need to touch on today. Thanks.
George, 2 questions. So the outdoor dining, that definitely expired?
April 1.
Okay.
April 1.
So there's no talk of extension on that?
No, well, we can't. I don't know that the governor would or the state legislature would. I have not heard of that.
Okay.
No.
And then on Palmer's, the extension ends when for the?
So it was going to expire the end of this month, so it's now a year from then.
Okay.
And I don't believe that it doesn't need to be completed by then. They simply need to be moving forward, undertaking the construction, having the building permit issued, and moving forward with the construction.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
George, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
On the outdoor dining, given the expiration of the governor's sort of emergency powers, I think,
Yeah.
which a lot of that fell under, is there anything sort of in town, the way that our restaurants have operated and our residents sort of enjoy themselves and what we've become accustomed to? Are there things that we may need to consider changing in our local ordinances to deal with things that we've gotten used to make sure we're facilitating and supporting businesses and so forth?
Yes, the interesting question will be the parking requirements, because typically we are using parking for
Right.
those spots, and the number of the restaurants are pretty well maxed out on their parking, so we've given them some leeway. So we may have to change those requirements if there's any appetite to ensure that they continue. That is not a foregone conclusion, I would say, at P&Z at this point. There are certain properties where we think maybe they need more parking, and they need to go back inside where they originally were. But that's not clear. We're going to have to go on a case-by-case basis and see how the parking does along.
And George, is that, just for the residents' perspective, is that because the outdoor dining has kind of added seats rather than just taking the same seats and moving them outdoor?
Yes, that's the upshot, although originally, of course, they weren't eating inside.
Yeah.
But now they're doing both,
Yeah.
which we're happy for the businesses, but we have to be cognizant of the overflow of parking to neighboring properties and that kind of thing.
And maybe even thinking about the timing, are there more pinch points at certain times versus other times? But we have a ton of new restaurants all coming into town, and
Yes. Yes, the pinch point aspect, enforcement, I suspect, would become difficult for that, so I don't know how you do it, but we want to encourage the businesses, there's no question about that, and to the extent they grow, that's fine. But, there are a couple in our minds that may be difficult to continue.
Got it. I mean, in my view, it's, successful businesses means valuable real estate, which means higher grand lists.
Yeah, I get your perspective.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's budget season.
Yeah, right.
We're always in the middle of it,
Okay.
rather.
On the outdoor dining, too, the restaurants that have had outdoor dining for the last several years, we're doing it on town property, utilizing parking spaces.
Yeah.
And right now, we have, with all the development downtown,
Yeah.
there's a crunch for parking, non-commuter parking, merchant-type parking. So that's an issue. But if we were to want to continue to allow that, at some point, the town has to actually enter into a lease. And that means RTM approval as well.
Got it.
So it's not simple.
Well, it certainly won't be getting solved at this table, but I do think it's something to think about in terms of,
Oh, it's coming. We're going to deal with it in the next month or so, I'm sure.
With respect to where town property is being used from a parking spot, are there a lot of complaints about parking in town?
Depends on who you talk to.
Okay. No, I think of some of the tight spots you may be thinking of, and to be honest, I've never had a problem parking. And I don't know if you get complaints from people whose property is used even when their businesses are closed, but again, it'll be an interesting conversation. But
Yes,
I love, there's always complaining about parking because you may have to walk
Yeah.
versus can you not
Yeah.
really find a parking space in town?
Well, and there's also what is going to be happening next with the redevelopment
Oh, yeah.
downtown, and
Absolutely.
what will that do?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And Dugark, the
Yeah.
complaints definitely are higher when the kids are home from school.
Sure, that makes total sense, yeah.
Mhm.
Good, thank you.
But we actually spent some time last night talking about sidewalks and walkability around town. Steve Mulvaney has a particular interest in that and keeps raising it because it's something we aspire to, and there should be more of it downtown, so.
Yeah.
It's okay if you can't park right in front of the restaurant.
Yeah,
Whatever,
right.
you might have to walk a couple times.
well, maybe on the heels that I know, we just acquired or agreed to acquire a sort of a large property, but we should maybe also think strategically if there are ever opportunities to acquire sort of property that may be adjacent to town parking or so forth. If there are ways to sort of expand that, we should think about that, as well.
Okay, I defer to others on that one.
Okay.
The only, I had one other thing that I'm hearing, and that is a concern about the size of Darien Commons. It appears outsized for the neighborhood. We have Palmer's coming along, so speak early rather than later. Don't, say something early.
I think that
They-
ship
you
has
don't-
sailed, I'm
You don't
afraid.
see that with, like Corbin Drive seems, to fit, but.
Well, you wait. You wait. I have a feeling it's gonna look pretty big too.
Well,
but-
you guys are the ones who control it, so.
Yes, I won't, yes, the board did, the commission did, yes. Listen, it's gonna be great, it's gonna be great. They're selling out and leasing out, all of them, as I understand it, both Corbin and Federal. So we're gonna have to adjust to it, I think is really the bottom line. It's gonna be new to us, but we townies, we're used to those 1 and 2 level things, and it's gonna be different now. But I don't see that as bad.
Well, as long as it's not used as some sort of predicate for the other train stations. You have a bunch of train stations that all affect Darien, transit-oriented development. It just, just throwing that out to you.
Mm-hmm, okay.
Well, I think, when you think about just the sheer size of it, right, if that's sort of one of the
Oh,
questions,
yeah.
I will say, go to Westport a fair amount and, kind of back behind the Playhouse there, if you look at all that development. I can remember, 5 or 6 years ago, the first time I went there, it seemed massive. And now when I go there, it, kind of feels like you're down a little bit in the West Village. I mean, you become a little bit more accustomed to it and
Yeah.
Well,
enjoyable,
that's a
so.
different area, but we're in the middle of a residential area.
So Seth, to your point, I think that's a good point, that it appears really large right now. That's why I think it's really important for our residents, when these plans are proposed, to dial in when those decisions are still, being debated. So.
And when you look at the plan, make sure that it references the buildings around it. You
Right.
know, if you don't get that perspective, then you can't see it. If somebody comes in and says, well, look at that, and say, man, that's a nice looking building. But you have to also
I think
say, well,
I think planning and zoning does a pretty good job of looking at it from the entire neighborhood view. And I think I'll just reiterate, I think that there's there's always a window when your voice is most
Oh, yeah,
powerful.
absolutely.
And that's before.
well, we've got Palmer's coming.
Yeah.
That too is already approved.
Yeah.
So,
No real changes to the design there, right? Just from
No,
an
not-
extension and demo standpoint?
Not recently. We did make some changes between the closing down of the facilities and now, but that was probably 12 months ago.
Right.
But nothing new, nothing new. As I understand it, the daycare facility is still part of it, and lots of restaurants and mixed use. Lots of
I'm
residents.
sure it falls in your purview, but I will say I'm impressed with the amount of landscaping that they've done over there, and I think that should always be an important component of any of these developments, is the landscaping, like the traditional lighting, the curbing. I think that it'll play into the whole walkability of the
Yes,
area there,
yes,
so.
that Federal has done,
Yeah.
Darien Commons. I agree. Frankly, I would say we are sensitive to it. I think they've gone beyond what we would have
Good.
certainly required.
Okay, thanks for filling in, George.
Glad to do it. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Appreciate it. Glad to be back.
Okay.
Jim?
So, good morning. So I'll start off with the budget and just, I guess, let everybody know, including the public. Next Tuesday, March 14th at 7:30, the Board of Finance holds its sort of statutorily required public hearing on the budget. And that's in the auditorium downstairs, again, 7:30, March 14th. And that's our ability, our opportunity to listen to sort of residents to come forward to speak to either one of the budgets that have been put forward, the Board of Selectmen budget or the Board of Ed budget. So, this is the time to come out and sort of be heard as the Board of Finance begins its sort of official review of the budgets.
Jim, do you take any, sorry to interrupt, do you take any emails or anything like that beforehand that will be taken into consideration?
Yeah, so we can, in terms of entering stuff into the public hearing, which we will use and sort of as we sort of review the budgets. You can show up on next Tuesday night. You can send us emails. You can send us emails throughout the entire sort of budget process. And if you do want to speak, you can either send myself or Jen Charneski an email ahead of time, and we'll create a list, or you can show up and come down, and we'll have a sign-up list at the auditorium. But we do encourage everyone to speak about if they have comments that want to be heard about both budgets. So, kind of on the budget topic, what I would say is I'd first kind of say congrats, Monica and Duke, to both of you guys and your boards for approving the budgets. I spent a lot of time, as did, I can speak for the rest of my board as well, listening to all your deliberations. I think we provided some questions to both of you sort of early on, but more just for you to consider. And I'll say, sitting back and letting you both work through your respective CEOs' budgets, Dr. Adley's and Kate, our town administrator's budget. It was exciting and I think refreshing and encouraging listening to you, how you sort of both led your board's discussions on it. I think the number of times I heard the word efficiency, cost savings, how does this impact services, how does this impact students, constantly reevaluating what we're doing and how we're doing it. I know on the Board of Ed side, there were adjustments in terms of FTEs, bringing down FTEs here, moving FTEs over, rethinking about sort of how you allocate services. There was a lot of discussion on the Board of the Selectmen side around similarly. And what I would say is, this is my 16th year, I think, working on the budgets, 8 on the Board of Finance, and before that 8 on the RTM. I would probably say this was the absolute, I think, best opportunity to kind of listen to both of you lead your boards in that discussion. Again, besides the actual discussions, I would say the way in which your boards discuss them, it was 9 and 5 people sort of working together, everyone sort of throwing out ideas, everyone, sort of being encouraged to throw out ideas in terms of cost savings, improving services and so forth. The complete absence of any sort of discouragement about people throwing out ideas. I think both of you have sort of set up a process for each of your boards where all of your members were encouraged to kind of throw out ideas that may be popular or may not be popular, but things that the board should definitely consider. And so I would applaud you guys for both of you in terms of what you have done, right? I mean, we've seen budget seasons over the past where it's, you see a lot of this at the table. I saw none of that. I saw a lot of, thinking about outcomes, thinking about sort of efficiencies, thinking about, tax dollars. So I think, to me, that's equally as important as the outcome in terms of the dollars and the percentages. That doesn't mean we don't look at the dollars, but I applaud you both for what you and your boards have done there. I think in terms of the overall process, I will say one of the things I found most valuable about this process is the recognition that when your processes start, it is your town administrator and her staff's budget that they're proposing to your board, and it is Dr. Adley and his staff's budget that they're proposing to you. And I think while we gave you some questions early on to think about things that we observed, you didn't hear 100 questions from the Board of Finance during your Super Saturday or during your reviews that you had. And I think I found it very valuable to the process to sit back and let your board review your respective staff's budget and work with them and sort of give you the space and the recognition that these aren't your budgets yet until you've gone through them with your staff and as a board debated where you want to move them. So as you think about the process going forward, we're always watching all of these meetings and sort of looking at it, and I've given you all feedback in terms of things that I've heard, but I think it's helpful for the process to give you a little bit of space, I think, to be able to work with your staffs and develop your budget. And I think as you both got closer to the end, you got a little bit more, you had some more questions for me and so forth, but I think as you think about how you may want to redesign your process in the future, I think it's good for the public to kind of recognize when you first get your budgets, that's not the budget that you're proposing. It may well be, because your staff does a great job, but the ideas that your staff is putting forward may be the same or different, or maybe ideas and things that you need to think about. So I like the process where you have some time and you begin to involve the Board of Finance and the RTM a little bit later in that process. And I would say thank you to the Channel 79, because it's incredibly helpful to be able to listen to your debate. Because I think listening to that is better than trying to sometimes ask questions, give opinions in the very beginning. So
I think you're right. Super Saturday is a lot of data in a short period of time, and you have to kind of take a deep breath and step back. It's hard to make comments when you're just, all of a sudden, it's 100 and some odd pages. You can't digest that sitting there on a Saturday. It takes time to back away and also to listen to the debate. So I think you're right, yeah.
And I think in helping you use your staff and their time most efficiently, it's,
Jim, you mean our boards?
No, your board using your staff.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is like us, if something may be in the superintendent or the town administrator's budget, if we all of a sudden are sending you questions and asking your staff to spend a lot of time on questions that we have, they may not be priorities, or your board may not be focused on that. So I think I want to make sure that both of your boards are able to use your staff's time to answer your questions on things that are your priorities and not necessarily occupy a lot of that. So just as we think about how we can always make this process better.
Streamline it, yeah.
And streamlining it, that's something we may want to consider.
Yeah, thank you.
Good feedback.
In terms of, I mentioned we have the public hearing on the 14th. Our following meeting is on the 21st, where we'll begin sort of looking at, and I'll come up with a schedule very shortly here, on different budget areas within the Board of Selectmen budget, and then ultimately a little bit later in the month on the Board of Ed budget. We'll also on March 21st be talking with Jen and Charneski and our financing advisor will help us develop plans. We'll make some decisions on the 21st in terms of how we want to bond both Great Island and the HHR, a portion of the HHR projects that we'll start with, and some other sort of smaller capital items that we're going to be bonding. So that'll be a sort of healthy discussion on the 21st. The 21st is the first of the two-day meeting that the Fed OMC will be debating their next market move, which will come out on the 22nd. So, you know, we will be going to market after that Fed move, so we'll see sort of what happens there. I think many are expecting, I'm not going to predict here on what's going to happen with rates. Most believe there will be another adjustment there, but I think most importantly will be what the language is that comes out of the minutes out of that meeting in terms of what's going to happen in the future. You know, rates, we saw large benefit over the last 3 months, although I would say the last month rates have kind of kicked back up a little bit, but I think the municipal market is performing extremely well, so I think we're in good shape to do what will be, maybe Kate will correct me, but our largest bonding deal
Ever.
Yeah, right.
Ever.
So get ready to have your signature on that.
What do you think?
In terms of other items here, I think that's really it in terms of big things that are coming down for us. What I would say is, in terms of the budgets, and I've asked this before, what I'd like to do is after we get through this budget season and we're able to take a little bit of a breath of fresh air, there's been a lot, healthcare is one of the fastest growing pieces of both of our budgets. And like, our staff, I think, has continued to do a good job about sort of bidding and rebidding and looking at efficiencies and so forth, and working with our sort of employees to develop the programs which are the best overall for the town and for employees. But one of the things I would very much like to, and I'm sure the Board of Finance would commit some resources to that, but really consider, there are some other towns that look at self-insuring some portion of our healthcare expenses that would require some additional capital, that does sort of add some additional volatility. And I know our respective staffs have had some discussions about that, but I'd like to really, over the summer, if you will, for a summer project, work with some outside advisors and really understand what are the potential benefits, what are the potential costs, what are some of the experiences of other towns been in terms of thinking about whether this could be the right solution for Darien. It may not be, but I do think, just given how quickly these things are rising, I know we're constantly trying to deal with it on a year-to-year basis, but should be sitting back and looking at sort of a longer-term solution.
That's a great idea.
I've gotten into that a while back, self-insuring. I ran risk management for a corporation for a while. Did not want that job, but I got it. And I found that if you have a manager, an insurance company that helps you manage it as an agent, and a lot of times if you go to self-insurance, they also have programs to help you keep your costs down. So they'll provide you with programs, briefings, all kinds of things to try to support that. They sort of, I think they think it's a smart thing to do in some instances, but you have to have a program to try and work on keeping the costs down that's continuous. We had a education program that we did for employees to help keep our liability costs down. So, just offer that to you.
Yeah. I think we should look at it holistic. If there are incentives that we can provide to our employees in terms of preventative healthcare or other things, all of which that might bring this overall cost down. I just think it's a big number and it's growing quickly, and I think we need to think about it holistically as a town. Kind of looking into the 5-year plan. I mean, healthcare is going to become an increasingly portion of our budget every single year. And what we don't want are sort of things like that, which are absolute priorities, to be crowding out other expenses.
call me Methuselah, but I'm pretty sure that at one point the Board of Ed self-insured in its health insurance.
Not in my time on the board,
Okay,
but it's
no,
possible.
back in mine.
That'll take us back,
And
George.
I'm going back, I'm going back to
Yeah, I
the
think you're
aughts.
right, George.
For literally, but we did.
Sounds like a Great Island Jim Palin Healthcare Summit.
There you go.
Our biggest challenge with self-insurance, and we have looked at it in the past, it's our size. The town alone is far too small.
Yeah.
Even with the Board of Ed, if we were to join forces, we're still not really big enough to be truly reliable, to know that we can weather the bumps. So there may be other ways to do it. So it'll be very interesting
Yeah.
to look at this and see, if we have some kind of capital infusion into a self-insurance fund, if that will enable us to smooth things out. So it'll be really interesting, because we haven't looked at it in probably at least 10 years. But we did once do a study on it,
Yeah.
and it'll be interesting.
It's worth the look. It's worth the planning around it.
Right, and then I was thinking also, to your point, if you know other towns that are doing it, could it be something that you opt to do with another town?
Yeah, it's, one of the challenges there would be the different bargaining agreements. But again,
It comes down to
interesting
contracts.
thought
That's
to
the
look
biggest
into.
issue. Same with
Yeah.
pensions. The contract is.
Contract
Yeah,
is
I mean, I think on the Board of Ed side, I think there is a co-op that we have negotiated, right, with, in terms of overall rates and so forth, but I
Yes.
think, solution's not gonna be found today, but I do
Yeah.
think we need to really have a concerted effort. I mean, that's looking at this, just given the sheer size of it. I mean, I say we have like an IT committee versus the IT budget, we should have sort of a healthcare effort that, whether it's every 5 or every 10 years, we're really looking at, where,
Well, just explore, 'cause we haven't explored it in a long time.
Yeah, it's a great
And
idea.
see what changes have come about, and thinking outside the box a little bit, what could we do?
yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, during budget time, we're looking at every single sort of box of crayons and shovel full of salt and everything, right? But I think this is an
Pencils.
opportunity for us to pencil, this is an opportunity for us to really kind of think about big things long-term, so.
Good.
And we've been good on salt this year.
Until you start talking about it.
Yes.
Talking about it.
All day today.
Right?
That's a great idea, Jim. Even if we come up with some kind of hybrid or something, it's a
Yeah.
great idea. Anything else for any of you? No? Okay, seeing nothing else, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seth moves, Duke seconds.
All in favor?
All in favor? Unanimous, terrific. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great meeting.